Henry Duers was born into slavery on October 15, 1846, to parents Priscilla Duers and Edmund Ned Duers. He had 2 brothers and 2 sisters. The entire family was enslaved on the plantation of James Duers in the town of Windsor in Bertie County, North Carolina. In 1853, Henry, along with 6 other slaves from the Duers plantation, were sold to Jonathan S. Taylor, a neighboring plantation owner, to settle the estate debts of James Duers. Henry, at age 7, was sold for $475. His mother and siblings remained at the Duers plantation. Henry was sold alone. In 1865, at the height of the Civil War, Henry, then 19, ran away from the plantation in search of freedom at great risk to his life. Shortly after his escape, he met a white soldier and recruiter for the Northern Army of New York. It was never Henry's intention to fight in the war. However, he was persuaded by the Northerner to volunteer and fight for the freedom of his enslaved mother and sister. Henry served as a private in the 14th U.S. Colored Troops Heavy Artillery, Company F, and he participated in one skirmish. He was honorably discharged on December 12, 1865. After the war, Henry returned to the plantation that he fled, made peace with his former owner, and worked there as a barrel stave maker, a lucrative occupation according to Henry. On February 18, 1867, Henry, then 20, married Elizabeth Taylor, a former slave on the Taylor plantation. Their marriage produced 2 children, a daughter who died as an infant, and a son, William Henry Duers. In slavery, Henry learned many skills, including carpentry and bricklaying, and he utilized these skills to build a home for his family by himself. Sadly, 3 years after his marriage, Elizabeth died. Shortly thereafter, Henry's mother and sisters left North Carolina, and Henry followed suit and moved to Yonkers, New York. He was employed as the hotel keep at Hotel Getty in Getty Square, a hackman, and ran a laundry service from his home at 58 North Broadway. It was during this time that Henry became actively involved in a local church on Ashburton Avenue, an environment that inspired him to answer the call to go into ministry. From 1873 to 1880, he attended the Richmond Institute in Richmond, Virginia, a theological institute for the freedmen of the South. He lived on campus for 8 months during the school term. However, his permanent residence was listed as Yonkers in the school catalog. Upon completion of his studies, he received his license to preach, an incredible accomplishment for a former slave that was unable to read and write. Henry returned to Yonkers and established his first church, Bethlehem Baptist Church on Warburton Avenue. In 1889, the Reverend Duers was appointed missionary to Sing Sing, now Ossining, holding Sunday Bible classes and Wednesday prayer services in the various homes of the small membership of 9, including the home of Mr. and Mrs. Graham at 2 Ann Street. The following year, in November of 1890, the Reverend Duers' mission was formally recognized as an institution of God during the centennial service for the First Baptist Church. The members' participation in the celebration, along with the forthcoming Christmas holiday, inspired the naming of the church, Centennial Star of Bethlehem Baptist Church. Through the many relationships the Reverend had cultivated in the village, he was able to secure locations for the church to meet, utilizing space in local businesses, including the Temperance Hall, which was the location of the Macy's cigar store at 171 Main Street, and the Olive Opera House on Central Avenue. Through the concerted efforts of the Reverend and his flock, they saved enough money to purchase a plot of land with a cottage on it at 76 Spring Street, where they would hold services until they were able to build a church. The cottage also served as the first residence for the Reverend, who was commuting from Brooklyn, where he lived for a short time. The Reverend Duers worked diligently and tirelessly to raise the $500 needed to begin construction of the church at 76 Spring Street. But please note, the village would later renumber the dwellings on Spring Street, and 76 would become 148 Spring Street. How ironic. The cost to build the church was $25 shy of the value placed on his life when he was 7 years old. It was in 1892 that this work would come to fruition as the Reverend oversaw construction of the church. The little cottage was moved back on its foundation, and the brick church was built in front of it. The Reverend laid many of the bricks with his own hands. Reverend Duers led his growing flock and performed baptisms in the Hudson River until he retired in 1924, though he remained a regular contributing member of the church and mentor to the leadership. In 1932, the little brick church was knocked down in order to give way to a larger one built in its place to accommodate the 250 parishioners. Through the efforts of Reverend Duers, all of the church debts were paid off, including the mortgage. In 1977, the church purchased land at the site of the Ossining Hospital at 304 Spring Street, where the church stands today. The Old Star Church at 148 Spring Street still stands and is home to a Spanish-speaking church, Iglesia Cristiana Trinidad de Dios. Although retired, Reverend Duers' contributions reached far beyond the pulpit. He was a sought-after teacher, speaker, curator of essays for publications, mentor, and active member of the community, who served as a member of countless local organizations, including being the treasurer of the Negro Elks, an honorary member of the VFW, an honorary member of the Young People's Club at St. Matthew's Methodist Church on North Malcolm Street, and he was 80 years old in his induction. Member of 2 posts of the Grand Army of the Republic, the Morrell Post in Ossining and the William Lloyd Garrison Post in Brooklyn. Troop leader of Boy Scout Troop Number 30 in Ossining and chaplain to the Republican Colored Welfare Association, and a member of the Mite Club at the Star Bethlehem Church. The Reverend was an advocate for education, as he believed it was the way to make people into good citizens. He believed the church had a responsibility to maintain law and order in the community, as well as providing outlets for positive entertainment. He unapologetically and fearlessly defended the rights of his flock and demanded equal rights and treatment for all, such as when he requested the burial of an executed prisoner in Sing Sing prison to Sparta Cemetery. The Reverend Duers was often called upon to be the spiritual advisor to African American men on death row in Sing Sing. In 1897, he was called to be the advisor of Howard Scott, a black man convicted and sentenced to death for killing his wife. Inmates whose remains were unclaimed were buried in Gallery 25, the prison cemetery on the westerly end of Hunter Street. However, Reverend Duers wanted Scott buried in a more dignified manner. After Scott's execution, in which the Reverend witnessed, he claimed the body from the prison and had Scott interred at Sparta Cemetery, a decision that would vex the community. However, the Reverend believed that Scott made peace with his Maker and deserved a proper burial. He was not afraid to have an unpopular opinion and went against the popular majority for what he thought was just and right. Reverend Duers was a beacon of light and a pillar in the community. He was instrumental in bringing countless African American families from Bertie County, North Carolina, to Ossining during the Great Migration in the early 1900s. He offered his large 13-room home on Durston Avenue, which we now know as Hunter Street, to families who needed accommodations while they acclimated themselves to life in the village. His home became affectionately known to the blossoming African American community as Duers Ranch and Duers Hotel. Reverend Duers was a well-respected man of the community, well known for his service to the church, people, and this country. In fact, during the Veterans Day parades, the Reverend Duers, who was the last Civil War vet in the village, was a crowd favorite. The community marveled at the sight of him in the police-escorted vehicle as it cruised the parade route to Nelson Park, where the Reverend delivered powerful addresses to the crowd. On June 22, 1940, Reverend Duers died in the Ossining Hospital. In August 1940, by the proposal of the Ossining Negro Civic Organization and the adoption of a resolution by the Ossining Village Board of Trustees, the island in front of the Lincoln School at the intersection of Brandreth, Broadway, and Aqueduct Streets was named Duers Circle in his memory. The community celebrated his life annually for many years thereafter. In a 1941 dedication ceremony, A bronze tablet mounted on a huge boulder was unveiled at Duers Circle, now located at Nelson Park. The event was quite the spectacle. A parade ensued from the church to Duers Circle, drawing attendees from all walks of life, including Ossining elected officials, religious leaders from every church in town, church leaders from the city and throughout the state, multiple veterans organizations, community members, and powerful civic leaders, including Adam Clayton Powell, Jr., who said this about Reverend Duers in his address. Reverend Duers was not a Negro. He was a member and a symbol of democracy. This man labored in darkness worse than we have ever known. He broke down the barriers of illiteracy, poverty, and slavery. He proved that there is no barrier that cannot be overcome. In 1952, 12 years after his death, the Citizen Register published an article boasting of the many notes and phone calls they received from citizens expressing their grief, recognizing the loss of this great man. In 1963, by recommendation of the Central Committee of Organized War Veterans, and in accordance with the town of Ossining policy of naming streets after veterans, a street was named Duers Court in honor of the Reverend. Reverend Henry Edward Duers was a beloved husband of 3, father, grandfather, and great-grandfather, the last Civil War veteran in Ossining, founder of Star Bethlehem Baptist Church, organizer of 12 other churches throughout the county and one in Bertie County, North Carolina. He licensed 41 men and 3 women. He was a prominent speaker, writer, mentor, and one of the most influential men among his people, flock, and the Ossining community. We are proud to honor his memory and acknowledge the triumphs of his work, which still resonate with us today. Reverend Henry Edward Duers, we salute you.